right? So now I'm gonna stop babbling. I'm babbling on for 30 minutes. I'm gonna stop babbling on because I know if I babble on, I'm never gonna get to reading this book. Obviously, I'm gonna start reading, right? This book. I'll comment to make more interesting because I know if I just read it could be a bit more boring, obviously. But I'm pretty sure you guys are even when I read it's exciting because you guys are getting. When I read, you guys are getting an idea of the world of Zanes. And when I read this, you got it's finally gonna hit your minds how different the movies are from the books. As Peter Jackson only followed 20% of the book, man. There's a lot of differences when you read them, Zen. Anyways, let me start this. Okay. So chapter one is called A Long Expected Journey. Okay. So when Mr. Bilbo Baggins, so you guys all know who Bilbo is. Bilbo is Frodo's uncle. Right? Frodo's uncle, right? So when Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End, you guys all know where Bag End is, right? Bag End's in the Shire, obviously, announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday. Remember, in the prologue, it said most hobbits can live up to 100 years, but the reason why Bilbo is able to live past 100 is because he has the ring, obviously. The ring grants him a longer lifespan, because the ring is magical, obviously. And also, the ring is so magical let's say, for example, if a hobbit finds the ring all of a sudden can is able to fit fit into his finger. Because hobbits have smaller hands than elves. Sauron has a huge hand. Remember in Lord of the Rings, the movie, when Isildur took the ring, when Isildur slain Sauron, he took the ring. The ring shrunk in size to his hand size. Well, the ring is a magical ring. It can shrink to what? To the bearer's hand size, obviously. Just thought I should throw that out there. Right. So Mr. Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th first birthday. So that's in the movie. Bilbo's 111th first birthday is in the movie, but the details not all there in the movie. I'll say that. With a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar. Remember how in the prologue it said Bilbo brought wealth with him from his journey. Bilbo's very rich, obviously, rich and famous. The most famous hobbit in the Shire, obviously. So Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years. So this is 60 years later after Bilbo's journey from there and back again. His journey 60 years prior when he found the ring and when he met Gollum and the dwarves and all them, right? So Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years, ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return, there and back again, obviously. The riches he had brought back from his travels, like I said earlier, and now become a local legend, and it was popularly believed, whatever the old folk might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure, because Bilbo brought back treasure, obviously he's rich, obviously from his journey. And if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as in 50. Hence, he never what? Even though Bilbo was aging, he never aged. Remember how in the movie when Bilbo was 111 and yet he only looked like he was about 60, 70 years old. And all of a sudden, when Frodo got the ring, he started to age because he no longer had the ring. You saw how old and how aged you look, obviously, right? That's an example here, obviously. And if that was not enough for fame, he was famous, obviously, the most famous hobbit in the Shire. He prolonged vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was much the same as at 50, obviously. At 99, they began to call him well preserved, but unchanged. Like I said earlier, he barely aged, obviously. Would have been nearer to the mark, right? Nearer to the mark, obviously. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess, apparently, perpetual youth as well as exhaustible wealth. So he was rich, and he also what? He looked very healthy, obviously. Right? It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. But so far, trouble had not come, and as Mr. Baggins was generous with his money, most people were willing to forgive him with his oddness and his good fortune. He remained on visiting terms with his relatives, except of course the Sackville Bagginses. Remember the Sackville Bagginses in the movie? Sackville Bagginses, and Frodo hides him. Well, that's where they get the idea from in the book, obviously. And he had many devoted admirers among the hobbits of poor and unimportant families, but he was no close friends until some of his younger cousins began to grow up. obviously. The eldest of these, and Bilbo's favorite, was young Frodo Baggins. So Frodo was the oldest, obviously, of his what? What did it say earlier? Frodo Frodo was Frodo Frodo was the oldest of his cousins. Frodo was cousin? I thought Frodo was his nephew. I'm confused. Might be wrong here. But he had no close friends until some of his younger cousins began to grow up. The eldest of these was Bilbo's favorite young. So yeah, so Frodo is Bilbo's cousin. I thought Frodo was Bilbo's nephew. Guess I was wrong, right? And the eldest of these was Bilbo's favorite was young Frodo Baggins. When Bilbo was 99, he adopted Frodo as his heir and brought him to live at Baggins. So Frodo was obviously rich too because he was the heir. Frodo was his heir, obviously. He brought him to live at Baggin, and the hopes of the Sacred Balancers were finally dashed. Bilbo and Frodo happened to have the same birthday, so they were born the same day, September 22nd. You had better come and live here, Frodo, my lad, said Bilbo one day, and then we can celebrate our birthday parties comfortably together. At that time, Bilbo was still in his tweens, as a hobbit called the irresponsible 20s between childhood and coming of age of 33. So Frodo was still young at this time, obviously. He was 33 years old, obviously. When Frodo leaves the Shire 17 years later, so he's 50 years old. The 12 more years pass. Each of the Bagginses had given very lively combined birthday parties at Bag End, but now it was understood that something quite exceptional was being planned for that autumn. Bilbo was going to be 111, a rather curious number, and a very reach, right? And Frodo was going to be 33. An important number of the day is coming to age, obviously. Tongues began to wag in Hobbiton and Bywater, and rumor of the coming event traveled all over the Shire. The history of the character of Mr. Bilbo Baggins became once again the chief topic of conversations, as Bilbo was obviously very popular in the Shire, obviously, and the older folks suddenly found their reminiscences in welcome demand. No one had more attentive audience than old Ham Gamgee, commonly known as the Gaffer. He held forth at Ivy Bush, a small inn on the Bywater Road, and he spoke with some authority, for he had tended the garden at Back End for 40 years, and had helped old Hallman in the same job before that. Now that he was himself growing old and stiff in the joints, the job was mainly carried on by his young eldest son, obviously. So Ham Gamgee is the father of Samwise Gamgee, and he's a gardener, and hence why Sam, obviously, in the book is a gardener, because he took after his father, obviously. Samwise Gamgee, if I'm correct here, right? Both father and son were on the very friendly terms with Bilbo and Bilbo, so Samwise Gamgee and Frodo and Bilbo and his father were friends, obviously. They lived on the hill itself. Again, this is not... You don't hear anything about Sam's father in the movie. Hence why I'm going to say this. And Frodo is like 33 years old when Bilbo's party takes place. Whereas in the movie, they have him look like he's in his 20s. When Frodo leaves the Shire, he's 50 years old. And yet in the movie, they have him look like he's in his 20s. A lot of differences from the book and the movie when you read. And now you guys are seeing the difference from the book and the movie. Yeah, there's some differences. I guarantee you guys thought Frodo was some 20-year-old guy in the book. But no, Frodo's like 50 years old when he leaves the Shire. Right? They lived on the hill itself in number 3, Bagshot Road, just below Bag End. A very nice, well-spoken, gentle hobbit is Mr. Bilbo, as I've always said, the Gaffer declared, with perfect truth, for Bilbo was very polite to him, calling him Master Handfast, and consulting him constantly upon the growing of vegetables. Remember how he said how the hobbits are, in the prologue said the hobbits are good with tools. Sam is a gardener, he plants vegetation, all stuff. Right? Consulting him constantly upon the growing of vegetables in the matter of roots, especially potatoes, the Gaffers was recognized as a leading authority by the neighborhood, including itself. What about this Frodo that lives with him? Asked Old Noakes of Bywater. Baggins is his name, but he's more than half a brandy buck, they say. It beats me why many Baggins of Hobbiton should go looking for a wife away there in the Buckland, where folks are so queer. So Frodo was half Brandybuck. He comes from the Brandybuck family, if I'm correct. It says here, but what about Frodo that lives with him? Old Noakes of Bywater, Baggins is his name, but he's more than half a Brandybuck. So Frodo is from the Brandybuck family of the hobbits, whatever it is. They say. It beats me why I could be mistaken. So to all you fantasy book nerds, bear with me, as I could be mistaken, as I'm not well grounded in Lord of the Rings that much. I'm pretty well grounded, but I'm not like fully grounded to the point whereby I can do a study about Lord of the Rings. I'm not that what? I'm not that well learned in Lord of the Rings that much. So bear with me here. It beats me why any baggins of Hobbiton should go looking for a wife away there in Buckland where folks are so queer. And no wonder they queer put in Daddy Twofut, the gaffer's next door neighbor, if they live on the wrong side of the Brandywine River and right again the old forest. That's a dark place, if half the tales be true. You're right, Dad, said the gaffer. Not that the brownie bucks of Buckland live in the old forest, but they're queer breed, seemingly. They fool about with boats on that big river, and that isn't natural. Small wonder that trouble came of it, I say. Remember, all these dialogues are not in the movie, man. But that that it may. Mr. Frodo is as nice a young hobbit as you could wish to meet, very much like Mr. Bilbo, and the more than looks. After all, his father was a Baggins. So Frodo is the son of Drago. I remember that. A decent, right? Very much like Mr. Bilbo and in more books. After all, his father was a Baggins. A decent, respectable hobbit was Mr. Drago. Correct, obviously, Baggins. There was never much to tell of him until he was drowned. Drowned, said several voices. They had heard this and other rumors before, of course, but hobbits have a passion of family history, and they were ready to hear it again. Why did his father drown? Because hobbits are not good swimmers. Just like in the prologue, it says hobbits cannot swim. Hence why in the movie, Peter Jackson portrayed that perfectly when Sam went after Frodo. He's like, I'm coming with you. You know what I'm saying? Don't you leave when someone's guiding you. Remember when he goes into the water and he drowns? Hobbits can't swim, yeah. Hence why Frodo's father died, obviously, because his hobbits can't swim. Well, so they say, said the gaffer. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married poor Miss Permelia Browniebuck. She was our Mr. Bibble's first cousin on the mother's side, her mother being the youngest of the old Duke's daughter, and Mr. Drogo was his second cousin, so Mr. Frodo is his first and second cousin. That's confusing. So I thought Frodo was his nephew, and it's his cousin. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married a poor Miss Permelia Browniebuck. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married... So Mr. Drogo's wife was Permelia Browniebuck. She was our Mr. Bilbo's first cousin. So Drogo's wife was Bilbo's first cousin on the mother's side. Oh, the mother's side. Okay, that makes sense. Her mother being the youngest of the old Duke's daughter. And Mr. Drogo was his second cousin. So Mr. Drogo was Bilbo's second cousin, pretty much. So Mr. Frodo is his first and second cousin. So Frodo is Bilbo's second cousin. Once removed either way, as they say is, if you follow me and Mr. Draco was staying at Brandy Hall with his father-in-law, old Master Gorbadoc, as he often did after his marriage, him being partial to his victuals, and old Gorbadoc keeping a mighty generous table. And he went out boating in on the Brandywine River. So I've read how much pages? Give me a sec here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I'll read to page 41. That's 15 pages. I don't know if I can read the whole thing today. I might just read 10 pages and I'll just continue the rest. Because I don't know if I can read all 15 pages in the time I have left. Right? Boating on the Brandywine River, and he and his wife were drowned. So Frodo's mother and father were drowned in the Brandywine River, obviously. And poor Mr. Frodo was an only child and all. I've heard they went on the water after dinner in the moonlight, said Old Noakes, and it was Jorgo's weights as sunk the boat. By the way, you don't hear anything about Jorgo in the movies, obviously. And that's why I told you there's some differences in the movie and the book. A lot of differences. And I heard she pushed him in. By the way, do you all remember hearing any of this dialogue in the movies? This is not in the movie, man. And I heard she pushed him in, and he pulled her in after him. And Sandy Man, the Hobbiton's miller, you shouldn't listen to all you hear, Sandy Man, said the gaffer, who did not much like the miller. There isn't no call to go talking of pushing and pulling. Bolts are quite tricky enough for those that sit still without looking further for the cause of trouble. Anyways, there was this Mr. Frodo left an orphan, so Frodo was an orphan, stranded, as you might say, among these queer Bucklanders, being brought up anyhow in Brandy Hall, a regular warren, by all accounts old Master Gorbadoc, never had fewer than a couple hundred relations in the place. Mr. Bilbo never did a kinder deed than when he brought the lad back to live among decent folk. But I reckon it was a nasty knock for those Sackville Bagginses. They thought they were going to get Bag End that time when he bent off and was thought to be dead, and then he comes back and orders them off, and he goes on living and living, and never looking a day older. Bless him, obviously. So they're talking about Bilbo Baggins. How Bilbo Baggins, you know what I'm saying, he disappears, he comes back, he's rich, you know what I'm saying, he hasn't aged a day in like 60 plus years. Because he has the what? He has the magic ring, obviously, right? Right, and then he comes back and orders him off, and he goes on living, and never looking a day older. Bless him! And suddenly he produces an heir, and has all the papers made out proper. So Frodo has a will, obviously. The Sackville, so Frodo's rich, obviously. Whereas in the movies, in the movies they don't have. Frodo doesn't what? In the movies, Frodo is not really, you don't see him as a rich guy, whereas in the book, Frodo's rich, because he's the heir. He's the heir of what? He's Bilbo's heir, obviously. Right? The Sackville Bounds won't ever see the inside bag now, or it is hope not. There's a tidy bit of money tucked away up there, I hear tell, said a stranger. A visitor on business from Michael Delving in the West Farthing. All the top of your hill is full of tunnels packed with chests of gold and silver and jewels by what I've heard. Then you've heard more than what I can speak of, answered the gaffer. I know nothing about jewels. Mr. Bilbo is free with his money, and there seems no lack of it, but I know of no tunnel making. I saw Mr. Bilbo when he came back, a matter of 60 years ago, when I was a lad. Right, I was a lad. I'd not long come pretense to old Holman, him being my dad's cousin, but he had me up in Bag End helping him to keep folks from trapping and trespassing all over Garden while the sale was on. And in the middle of it all Mr. Bilbo comes up the hill with a pony and with some mighty big bags and a couple of chests. I don't doubt they were mostly full of treasure he had picked up in foreign parts. Obviously, because remember, the outside world to the hobbits is like what? The outside world, the hobbits are kind of like separated from the outside world. Hence why here they say in foreign parts, because the Shire is like the hobbits' country, and they're kind of separated from the outside world, obviously. Hence why Bilbo calls it an adventure, because he's never been outside. I believe, I might be wrong, he's never been outside the Shire until his journey. Until he had his journey, he's never been outside the Shire, if I'm correct. I could be wrong. To all you bookers out there who know the ins and outs of Lord of the Rings, I could be wrong, but to my understanding, Bilbo has never left the Shire, not until his journey 60 years ago, if I'm correct. I might be mistaken, though. Right? Mr. Bilbo comes up the hill with a pony and some mighty big bags and a couple of chests. I don't doubt they were mostly full of treasure he had picked up in foreign parts, where there will be mountains of gold, they say. That's the Hobbit, obviously, the story, right? There wasn't enough to fill tunnels, but my lad Sam will know more about that. He's in and out of Bag End, crazy about stories of old days. He is, and he listens to Mr. Bilbo Baggins' tales. So Samwise Gamgee listens to what? To Bilbo's tales, obviously. Bilbo has told him stories about his adventure, obviously. Mr. Bilbo has learned him his letters, meaning no harm, mark you, and I hope no harm will come of it. Elves and dragons, I says to him. Cabbages and potatoes are better for me and you. Don't go getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you, I says to him. And I might say it to others, he added with a look at Stranger and Miller. But the gaffer did not convince his eyes. I believe, the legend of Bilbo's wealth was now too firmly mixed in the minds of younger generations of hobbits, obviously. But he has likely enough been adding to what he brought at first, argued the Miller, voicing common opinion. He's often away from home, and look at the outlandish folk that visit him, dwarfs coming at night, and that old wandering conjurer, Gandalf and all. You can say what you like, Gaffer, but Bag End's a queer place, and its folks are queer. And you can say what you like about what you know, no more than you do of boating, Mr. Sandyman, retorted the Gaffer. Dislike the Miller even more than usual. If that's being queer, then we can do it with a more queerness in these parts. There's some not far away that wouldn't offer a pint of beer to a friend if they live in a hole with golden walls, but they do things proper at Bag End. Our Sam says that everyone's going to be invited to the party. Now he's talking about the party, obviously. So all the Shire is invited to Bilbo's party, obviously, right? And there's going to be presents, mark you. Presents for all this very month as it is, obviously. That very month was September, right? So Bilbo's September 22nd birthday is coming up, obviously. As fine as you could ask, a day or two later, a rumor probably started by the knowledgeable Sam. The reason why Sam is knowledgeable is because what? Bilbo has told him stories and all that stuff, right? Was a spread about there was going to be fireworks, obviously. Bilbo tells Sam stuff, tells Sam's a lot of things. Hence why Sam is very knowledgeable about what about Bilbo and all that stuff. If I'm right, I could be wrong here. Was spread about there were going to be fireworks. Fireworks, what is more, such as had not been seen in the Shire for nigh on a century, not needed since the old two. Remember in the movie how you got the fireworks? Well, that's where they got the idea off. What the book, obviously, the fireworks in Bilbo's birthday, obviously. Days passed, and the day drew nearer. An odd-looking wagon laden with odd-looking patches rolled into Hobbiton one evening and toiled up the hill to Bag End. The startled hobbits peered out of lamp-lit doors to gape at it. It was driven by outlandish folk. Remember, all these info dumps, man. Crazy. Singing strange songs, dwarves with long beards and deep hoods. A few of them remained at Bag End. At the end of the second week of September, a cart came in through Bywater from the direction of Brandywine Bridge in broad daylight. An old man was driving it all alone. He wore a tall pointed blue hat, a long grey cloak, and a silver scarf. He had a long white beard. This is Gandalf, obviously. Gandalf. By the way, there's some differences in the movie. The description of Gandalf in the movie and the description of Gandalf in the book, obviously. As Gandalf has a blue what? He has a blue hat in the book, whereas in the movie, Gandalf doesn't have a blue hat, if I'm correct. Obviously. But he does have a great cloak, though, in the movie. There's a few differences. And a silver scarf. Gandalf doesn't wear a scarf in the movie, whereas in the book, he wears a scarf, obviously, right? He had a long white beard and bushy eyebrows that struck out beyond the brim of his hat. Small hobbit children ran after the cart all through Hobbiton. That's in the movie when Frodo rides on the carriage with Gandalf, and then he does his magic and the fireworks go off and all the children are excited to see Gandalf. Remember that scene? That's where we get the idea of here, obviously, right? Small hobbits children ran after the cart all through Hobbiton and right to the hill. It had a cargo of fireworks, as they rightly guessed. At Bilbo's front door, the old man began to unload. That's in the movie, obviously, but the dialogue's different, though. There were great bundles of fireworks, all sorts and shapes, each labeled with a large red G and an elf rune. That was Gandalf's mark, of course, and the old man was Gandalf the wizard, like I said earlier, whose fame in the Shire was due mainly to his skill with fire, smokes, and lights, the magic, obviously. His real business was far more difficult and dangerous, but the Shire folk knew nothing about it. To them, he was just one of the attractions of the party, hence the excitement of the Hobbit children. Remember that scene in the movie how the children were excited to see Gandalf? They get that from the book, obviously. G for grand, they shouted, and the old man smiled, obviously. Right? They knew him by sight, though he only appeared in Hobbiton occasionally and never stopped long, and neither they nor any but oldest of the elders had seen one of the fireworks displays. They now belonged to a legendary past when the old man, helped by Bilbo and some dwarves, had finished unloading. Bilbo gave a few pennies away, but not a single squib or cracker was forthcoming, to the disappointment of the onlookers. Run away now, said Gandalf. You will get plenty when the time comes. Then he disappeared inside with Bilbo, and the door was shut. The young hobbits stared at the door in vain for a while, and then made off, feeling that the day of the party would never come. Inside Bag End, Bilbo and Gandalf were sitting at the open window of a small room, looking out west onto the garden. Right? The late afternoon was bright and peaceful. The flowers glowed red and golden, snapdragons of sunflowers, and nasturtiums trailing over their turf walls and peeping in the round windows. How's your bright garden look, said Gandalf. That's not in the movie. Yes, said Mr. Bilbo. I'm very fond indeed of it, and of all the dear old Shire, but I think I need a holiday. You mean to go on with your plan, then? I do. I made up my mind months ago, and I haven't changed it. Very well. It is no good saying any more. Stick to your plan, your whole plan, mind, and I hope it will turn out for the best for you and all of us. I hope so. Anyway, I mean to enjoy myself on Thursday and have my little joke. Who will laugh, I wonder, said Gandalf, shaking his head. We shall see, said Bilbo. The next day more carts rolled up the hill, and still more carts. There might have been some grumbling about dealing locally, but that every week. You see how the book is different from the movie? Yeah, I told you, man. The next day more carts rolled up in the hill, and still more carts. There might have been more grumbling about dealing locally, but that very week orders began to pour out of Bag End for every kind of provision, comedy or luxury that could be obtained in Hobbiton, or Bywater, or anywhere in the neighborhood. People became enthusiastic, and they began to tick off the days on the calendar, and they watched eagerly for the postman, hoping for invitations. So the people in the what? The people in Hobbiton, in the Shire, they're all excited for Bilbo's party, and they're hoping that the postman can what? They hoping they can get an invitation for Bilbo's birthday, obviously. Before the long invitations began pouring out, obviously. So everyone's excited for Bilbo's party in Hobbiton, right? In the Shire. Hobbiton post office was blocked, and the Bywater post office was snowed under, and the voluntary assistant postmen were called for. There was a constant stream of them going up the hill, carrying hundreds of polite variations on "Thank you, I shall certainly come." A notice appeared on the gate at Bag End: no admittance except on party business. Even those who had or pretended to have party business were seldom allowed inside. Bilbo was busy writing invitations, taking off answers, packing up presents, and making some private invitations for his own. From the time of Gandalf's arrival, he remained hidden from view. One morning, the hobbits woke to find a large field south of Bilbo's front door, covered with ropes and poles for tents and pavilions. A special entrance was cut into bank leading to the road. This is all info descriptions, right? Boring descriptions. And wide steps and large white gate were built there. It's more interesting when you read it out loud, by the way. When you read it on your own, obviously, right? The three hobbit families of Bagshot Road adjoining the field were intensely interested and generally envied. Old Gaffer Gamgee stopped even pretending to work in his garden. The tents began to go up. There was especially a large pavilion so big that the tree that grew in the field was right inside it and stood proudly near one end. Blah, 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 right? Who cares? And the end of the chief's stable. Lanterns were hung on all its branches, more promising still to the hobbit's mind. An enormous open-air kitchen was erected in the north corner of the field. A draught of cooks from every inn and eating house for miles around arrived to supplement dwarfs and other odd folk that were quartered at Bag End. Excitement rose to its height. I'm a scratchy throat. Right. Then the weather cloud over. That was Wednesday, the eve of the party. Anxiety was intense. Then Thursday, September 22nd, actually dawned. The sun got up. So right now they're talking about the lead up to his birthday. So people preparing, all that stuff, right? Whatever he said, right? People excited for his party, obviously. Bilbo preparing invitations, to keep himself hidden, that kind of stuff, right? Bilbo began calling the party, but it was really a variety of entertainment rolled into one. Practically everybody living here was invited, so most of the Shire was invited. A very few were overlooked by accident, but as they turned up all the same, that did not matter. Many people from other parts of Shire were also asked, and there were even a few from the outside the borders. Bilbo met the guests and additions at the new White Gate in person. He gave away presents to all sundry. The latter were those who went out again by back away and came in again by the gate. Again, this is not in the movie. Hobbits give presents to other people on their birthdays, not very expensive ones as a rule, and not so lavishly as on his occasions. But it was not bad system. Actually, in Hobbiton and Bywater, every day in the year was somebody's birthday, so that every hobbit in those parts had a fair chance of at least one present at least once a week. But they never got tired of them. On this occasion, the presents were unusually good. The hobbit children were so excited that for a while they almost forgot about eating. They were toys the like of which they had never seen before, all beautiful and some obviously magical. Many of them had indeed been ordered a year before, and had come all the way from the mountain from Dale, and were of real dwarf make. When every guest had been welcomed and was finally inside the gate, there were songs, dances, music, games, and of course, food and drink. There were three official meals: lunch, tea, and dinner, or supper. So Bilbo's birthday took place all day, obviously, right? Because it says here there was 3 meals. You have celebration of songs, dances. Just like in my book, you also have a celebration in Zanes, that kind of stuff. It's going to be top notch. But lunch and tea, that's where I got the idea of the celebration, the parties. When in volume 2 you have a party in Safias, you have a party in Zanes in volume 1, a nice party, looks like top notch. Obviously. Right, so when every guest had been welcomed and was finally inside the gate, there were songs, dances, music, games, and of course food and drink. There were 3 official meals: lunch, tea, and dinner. So his party took place for a day or half a day, whatever it is. But lunch and tea were marked chiefly by the act that those times all the guests were sitting down and eating together. Whereas in the movie, it only takes place at night. Whereas in the book, it takes place like half a day because it says they had lunch, tea, and dinner. So it took place for hours, obviously. Whereas in the movie, it only took place at nighttime. There's a few differences, obviously. A lot of differences. Now you guys see what I mean when I say the book is different from the movie, man. This is all this stuff. Some of the stuff is in the movie, but a lot of this stuff is not in the movie. It's cut out. The fireworks were by Gandalf. They were not only brought by him, but designed and made by him. Obviously, remember that scene in the movie when Gandalf was lighting the fireworks using his magic, whatever it is, and then right. That's where we get the idea off that. Obviously, they were not brought by him, but designed and made by him. And the special effects, set pieces, and flights of rockets were left off by him. There were also a precious distribution of squibs, crackers, back wrappers, sparkles, torches, dwarf candles, elf fountains, goblin barkers, and thunderclaps. They were all superb. The art of Gandalf improved with age. They were rockets like a flight of scintillating birds, whatever that is, singing with sweet voices. There were green trees with trunks of dark smoke, right? Their leaves open like a whole spring unfolding into a moment, and their shining branches drop glowing flowers down upon the astonished hobbits, disappearing with a sweet scent just before they touch their upturned faces. I'm gonna shut my camera off here.